Music. Bring her to me, he says. Maline's manicured nails dug into her champagne flute, the crystal fragile in her grip. 4 words whispered, yet the whole damn gala seemed to hold its breath. He's pointing at her, Amara. Fresh off the catering truck, a one-night gig to keep her mom breathing. These vultures don't see her quiet dignity. They see a disposable girl, someone to step over. They don't know Amara. They don't see the fire she hides behind those polite smiles. But Cassian Wolf does. Here's the thing they're all missing. Cassian doesn't want a trophy. He wants a weapon. And Amara? She's about to be armed with the kind of power these blue bloods can't even imagine. They have no idea how her quiet kindness will change everything. Amara Delaney, 24 years old, second-year grad student, working this gala on a one-night contract to help pay her mom's hospital bills. Black, beautiful, brilliant, and tonight completely out of place. At least that's what everyone else thought. She wasn't supposed to be noticed. That's the unspoken rule. Black girls like her didn't exist in places like this. Not really. Not unless they were serving wine or clearing plates or disappearing into kitchens with silent grace. But Amara, she had presence. Her eyes held something people couldn't name, but couldn't ignore. Maybe that's what made them uncomfortable. Maybe that's why just 30 minutes ago, a woman dripping in diamonds leaned in and whispered, "She reminds me of those sweet girls from the old South. You know, the help, laughter, condescension, champagne accidentally spilled across her tray and then down her blouse. The kind of humiliation designed to look like etiquette gone wrong. The kind that cuts deeper than words." She didn't react. She never did. She was taught to swallow it, smile it away, be professional, be forgettable. But not tonight, because from the mezzanine, Cassian Wolf Tech's billionaire recluse and the most powerful man in the building had just broken the script. He didn't ask for the senator's daughter or the Harvard grad with the million-follower podcast. He asked for her, and that's where this black story begins. Not with tragedy, not with begging, but with presence, with interruption, with a girl who dared to exist boldly where she was never meant to be. So stay with me, because this isn't just about race or class or scandal. It's about dignity, power, and what happens when silence is no longer safe. Hit that subscribe button, because what happens next? You won't believe it. The Whetstone Gala wasn't just a party. It was an institution held every fall at the historic Whitestone Manor, just outside Seattle. It was the kind of event that decided futures. Who would get the next big grant? Who might land a seat on a board? Who belonged and who didn't? The guests arrived in a slow-moving river of black-town cars and polished limousines, men in custom suits, women in floor-length gowns that whispered wealth with every step. The air was thick with perfume, status, and the illusion of grace. Inside, the ballroom shimmered, marble floors, tall arched windows framed by silk curtains. A 10-piece jazz band played the kind of music that made you feel like time itself had paused somewhere around 1856. And floating through it all, like part of the decor, and were the staff black vests, white gloves, hair tied back, eyes down. Amara Delaney moved among them. But she wasn't like them. Not entirely. There was something different in the way she carried herself. Graceful but alert, confident but careful. She didn't just serve wine. She moved like she was watching history unfold around her. And in a way, she was. As she offered a tray of hors d'oeuvres to a cluster of art patrons, one of them, a man with silver hair and a voice soaked in bourbon, eyed her with lazy curiosity. "You've got that look," he said, "like you stepped right out of a Langston Hughes poem." She forced a polite smile. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to compliment her with a line that held more weight than they understood. Moments later, a woman in a pearl choker waved her over. "You're new," she said, inspecting Amara the way someone might examine china. "Where did you train? You're very poised. My husband thinks that's rare these days." Rare, as if grace didn't come standard in women like her, as if her presence here was a novelty. Amara kept her voice even. "Just doing my best, ma'am." But inside something curled. Not anger, not quite. It was the quiet ache of being seen and unseen at the same time, of being a reflection instead of a person. She turned away back to the rhythm of the room, the music, the smiles, the sting of 1,000 small cuts. None of them knew what was coming next, but she could feel it. Something was shifting, and it had her name on it. The thing about racism in rooms like this, it never comes with a warning. It doesn't shout, it smiles, it clinks glasses. It wears satin gloves and speaks in compliments that sting like paper cuts. Amara was circling near the northern wing of the ballroom, offering a fresh tray of Bordeaux to a group of wealthy guests gathered near the sculpture display. It was her third lap in 15 minutes. She had memorized which guests liked to drink, which liked to talk, and which liked to ignore her presence entirely. But one guest, Malene Carrington, liked to play games. Malene was old money, blonde, poised and cruel in that effortless way only inherited wealth could afford. Her eyes sparkled with something cold as she locked onto Amara. "Oh, good," Malene cooed. "The help has returned." Amara extended the tray without a word, her posture perfect. Malene reached for a glass, then, as if guided by some invisible hand of malice, her fingers twitched. The stem of the wineglass tipped sideways. A deep red wave spilled across Amara's crisp white blouse, soaking into the fabric with the hunger of fire. Gasps, a smothered laugh. "Oh dear," Malene said, her lips curling into a slow venom-laced smile. "How clumsy of me." Amara stood still. Her hand still held the tray, though her knuckles had gone white. Her blouse clung to her skin. The cold of the wine burned warmer than it should have. A man next to Malene chuckled. "She's a good sport," he said, like in those old black and white films. "You remember? She didn't speak. She couldn't. There were no apologies. No one stepped forward to help. It wasn't an accident, and everyone knew it. But that's the thing about power in a room like this. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be shared among those who know the rules." And the rule was simple. People like Amara didn't matter. She took a slow breath. Not deep, just enough to steady herself. Then she nodded politely. "Excuse me," she said softly and walked away, leaving a trail of red footprints on the marble floor. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. But inside something snapped quietly, cleanly. Not the part of her that had grown used to humiliation, but the part of her that had stopped expecting more. Tonight, that part was waking up. From the mezzanine above the ballroom, Cassian Wolfe watched the evening unfold like a chessboard set in motion. He stood alone, hands tucked into the pockets of a tailored charcoal suit, a glass of untouched scotch resting on the railing. To most of the guests below, he was a myth, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. The man behind multiple AI startups, data security empires, and private think tanks no one dared to question. He rarely attended galas like this. He hated small talk and loathed phoniness. But tonight was different. Tonight, he was here for a reason he hadn't fully admitted to himself. His eyes scanned the crowd, brushing past CEOs, senators, socialites, all carbon copies of a world he had conquered but never belonged to. Then, like a string snapping in his mind, his gaze locked onto her, Amara. He didn't know her name yet. He only saw the back of her head at first, braids pinned neatly, shoulders squared, a crisp white blouse now stained red across the front. Something about the way she stood still, composed, as the laughter behind her died down felt electric. She didn't retreat in shame. She moved with purpose, with control. Cassian leaned forward slightly. He had grown up watching people pretend, watching cruelty packaged as etiquette. He'd seen what the world did to women who looked like her, women like his mother, strong, brilliant, undervalued, silenced. He watched as Amara excused herself, holding her tray like a shield. No one helped her. No one acknowledged her. But he saw everything. He turned to his assistant, standing silently by the curtain. "Who is she?" Cassian asked. The man glanced down, confused. "Which guest, sir?" Cassian didn't blink. "She's not a guest." The one in the wine-stained shirt, tray in her hand. The assistant followed his line of sight, eyes widening slightly. "I'll find out." Cassian nodded once, slow and deliberate. Then he spoke the words that would unravel the rest of the night. "Bring her to me." There was no explanation, no smile, no smirk, just a command. And as his assistant disappeared into the crowd, Cassian remained at the edge of the mezzanine, watching her move through a room designed to erase her. He didn't know her story yet, but he was about to. Amara had just reached the back hallway near the service corridor when a voice stopped her cold. "Excuse me, miss." She turned, expecting another guest complaint or maybe a reprimand from the event manager. But the man standing there wasn't wearing a suit for show. He had the build of someone trained to stop trouble before it started, and the earpiece confirmed it. "Mr. Wolf would like a word with you," he said quietly. Amara blinked. "I'm sorry." "Who?" "Cassian Wolf," he repeated, tone flat but respectful. "He asked for you personally." She stared at him for a beat. Stunned, her mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he thought she was someone else. Or maybe this was some kind of twisted continuation of the humiliation she'd just endured downstairs. She glanced at the wine stain on her blouse. I'm not dressed to meet anyone," she said, voice barely above a whisper. The man gave a slight nod, almost sympathetic. "He's aware," he still asked. A second of silence passed. Then she followed. The hallway curved into a private staircase guarded by another man in a discreet black suit. He nodded and opened the door. As she ascended, her breath grew shallow. Her hands tightened at her sides. What could a man like Cassian Wolf possibly want with her? At the top of the stairs, a hallway stretched out quiet, dimly lit, lined with dark wood panels and museum-grade artwork. The kind of hallway that cost more than a year of tuition. At the end, a set of double-glass doors opened into a private terrace. He was there, standing alone at the railing, city lights reflecting off his glass of untouched scotch. Cassian Wolf didn't turn right away. He let the silence settle like snow. When he finally did, his gaze met hers, sharp, unreadable. "Amara Delaney," he said, not as a question, but as a fact. Her pulse jumped. "How do you? I make it my business to know things," he said simply. She folded her arms, defensive. "You called me up here. Why?" He took a long breath and said, "Because I watched a room full of people try to erase you, and you didn't disappear." A pause. "You're the only real thing I've seen all night." The terrace was quiet, too quiet. The city glittered beyond the balcony, a tapestry of ambition and secrets. Inside, the air was cooler, calmer, but Amara could still feel the sting of the wine on her blouse, the weight of 100 eyes judging her from below. Cassian Wolf poured coffee from a silver carafe into 2 minimalist ceramic cups. "No sugar, no cream," he said without asking. "You strike me as someone who takes things as they are." Amara raised an eyebrow. "You strike me as someone who's used to getting what he wants." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Sometimes, not always." She accepted the cup, its warmth grounding. They stood a moment in silence. Then he asked, "Do you know why I asked you up here?" "I was hoping you'd get to that," she replied. Cassian leaned against the railing, coffee untouched. "I've been to 1,000 of these events," he said. "They all blur together. Same donors, same causes, same performances." He looked at her, really looked. "But tonight, I watched someone stand in the middle of all that noise and stay human." Amara let the words hang. She wasn't sure if it was a compliment or a setup. "So what now?" she asked. "You felt something, watching the help get humiliated, and now you want to fix it with coffee and a conversation." Her tone was even, but her spine was still. Cassian didn't flinch. "No, I don't want to fix it. I want to understand it." She stared at him. Most rich men ask questions to be seen asking. He seemed to ask because silence offended him. So she answered, "You want to know what I see? I see a room full of people pretending they earned a world they were handed. I see legacy wrapped in tuxedos, sipping on names they didn't build. And I see someone like me working twice as hard to stay invisible just to survive." Cassian's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. "And the worst part," she added, "they think they're being polite." He looked away, exhaling through his nose. Then finally, he nodded. "You're right." Another pause. "Which is why this is the most honest moment I've had in years." The quiet between them didn't last long. The sound of heels, sharp, fast, deliberate, cut through the stillness of the terrace like gunfire in a cathedral. Cassian's gaze shifted just before the glass doors swung open with force. Vanessa Hartford, legacy name, board member, investor in 3 of Cassian's companies. Tall, blonde, always in control. Tonight she wore a navy evening gown so tight it looked like it had been poured onto her. She didn't look at Cassian first. Her eyes locked onto Amara like a sniper finding a target. "Well," she said flatly, "this is new." Amara instinctively stepped back, though her feet didn't move. Cassian remained calm, but his body subtly shifted, placing himself between the two women. "Vanessa," he said, voice low, "you weren't expected up here." "I noticed," she replied, eyes never leaving Amara. "Is this an interview or a new kind of charity I wasn't briefed on?" Amara felt the words like a slap. No pretense, no sugarcoating, just venom. Vanessa took a step closer. "You're very poised," she said to Amara. "I'll give you that, but you should probably know being near Cassian comes with expectations and consequences." Cassian's voice sharpened. "That's enough." Vanessa turned to him, finding confusion. "I'm only trying to protect you. It's reckless. You're a public figure. One photo." "I'm not concerned about photos," he said. "Or your approval." The silence that followed was ice cold. Amara stood still, not because she was afraid, but because she was measuring the moment. She had seen women like Vanessa her whole life, polished, powerful, and terrified of losing their grip. "I'll go," Amara said quietly, her voice steady, but Cassian shook his head. "No, you won't." He turned to Vanessa. "You just showed me exactly what I needed to see." Vanessa's smile cracked, then vanished altogether. "Careful, Cassian. You're not untouchable." "Neither are you," he replied. Vanessa stared for a long second. Then without another word, she turned and walked out, heels stabbing the floor with every step. When the door closed behind her, the silence returned. But it wasn't peaceful. It was charged. Cassian looked at Amara. "Still want to go?" Amara exhaled. "No," she said. "Not yet." The wind picked up slightly on the terrace, brushing through Amara's braids and rustling the edge of Cassian's suit jacket. Neither of them moved. The moment with Vanessa had left a trace in the air. Anger. Yes, but something else too. Truth. Cassian finally spoke. "You want to know why I called you up here?" Amara didn't answer. She just looked at him, guarded but open. He took a slow sip of his coffee, then set the cup down with care. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, different. "My mother was a black woman, born in rural Georgia. Grew up poor, brilliant, tough as hell. She worked as a library assistant, but she could quote Baldwin and Morrison like scripture. She raised me on stories and warnings." Amara blinked, surprised. She hadn't expected that. Cassian continued. "When she got pregnant with me, my father's family disowned her, said she wasn't fit to carry the Wolf name. She raised me alone. No help, no apology, no inheritance." His eyes went distant for a second. "She died the year I sold my first company. Never saw a dime of it. Never got to walk into a room like that, one downstairs, and be anything but someone's afterthought." Amara's throat tightened, but she said nothing. "I built everything I have to prove I could," he said. "But success doesn't erase the smell of disrespect. You can still feel it in a handshake, hear it in a compliment. See it when a woman like you walks into a room full of people who'd rather not see her at all." Amara looked down at her stained blouse. It had dried stiff, a sharp red bloom across white cotton. "You brought me up here because I reminded you of her," she said. He didn't deny it. "I brought you up here because you refused to shrink. That's rare, especially in a place like this." The silence between them this time felt earned. Amara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I'm sorry she didn't get to see who you became." Cassian smiled just a little. "She would have liked you, would have told me to stay out of your way." That made Amara laugh, quiet, real, unexpected. In that moment, the air didn't feel quite so heavy, but the night was far from over. The first photo hit Twitter at 7:42 a.m., blurry, cropped, but clear enough to spark a fire. Amara standing on the private balcony of Whitestone Manor. Cassian Wolf next to her, their faces close, the city lights behind them glowing like stage lights on a scandal. No context, no captions, just a snapshot of two worlds colliding. Within an hour, it was trending. Number Servergate, number Wolf Affair, number Who is she? By noon, gossip blogs and tech outlets had picked it up. Headlines screamed speculation. Tech billionaire's secret romance. Waitress or gold digger? Cassian Wolf's mystery woman identified. They found her name, her LinkedIn, her school, even a photo from a scholarship event 3 years ago. By 3 p.m., her phone was vibrating nonstop. Unknown numbers, blocked calls, hundreds of DMs flooding her socials. Some curious, some kind, but most laced with cruelty. You think you're special now? Enjoy the ride, sweetheart. It won't last. Another nobody trying to sleep her way into a fortune. At 4:17 p.m., she got a call from her manager at the catering company. I'm sorry, Amara. The client's pulling back, says, it's not a good look. We have to let you go. Just like that. One photo, one night, and her world had shifted without her consent. She sat on the edge of her tiny bed in her shared apartment, still wearing the same wine-stained blouse. The stain had set now, permanent. Her roommate knocked gently. Hey, are you okay? Amara didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, because she didn't know what to say. She opened her phone, scrolled through the headlines, watched people she'd never met dissect her character, her body, her motives, as if she were a character in a soap opera, not a human being. She clicked on one article. It quoted Vanessa Hartford. Mr. Wolf is a generous man, sometimes too generous. I'm concerned for his reputation. That one hit different. Not because it was a lie, but because it was calculated, deliberate, designed to paint Amara as an opportunist, a mistake. She put the phone down, and for the first time that day, she let herself feel it. The shame, the fury, the helplessness of being talked about louder than you've ever been listened to. The internet doesn't forget, but worse, it doesn't forgive. The next morning, Amara woke up to a phone that felt radioactive. Overnight, the tone had shifted. It wasn't just gossip anymore. It was personal. It was cruel. It was vicious. She opened her Instagram out of habit, then immediately wished she hadn't. Hundreds of comments, not on a new post, but on old ones. Photos of her at her sister's graduation, her standing in front of a mural downtown, a picture of her holding a book in the library. The messages underneath had one thing in common. They were no longer about what she did. They were about who she was. She's not even that pretty. Typical affirmative action trash. Keep reaching, sweetheart. You'll still end up back where you came from. These women always want to play victim until the money dries up. And the worst ones didn't even use real words, just emojis. Monkeys, news, chains. She reported them, blocked a few, but it was like trying to bail water out of a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Her inbox was full of strangers offering protection in exchange for photos. Others told her to stay in her lane. Some tried to mask their hate and fake concern. You seem smart. Just don't ruin your life chasing some billionaire dream. She turned off her notifications, deleted the apps, but the damage had already carved itself into her chest. At noon, she got a call from Cassian. I'm sorry, he said, his voice lower than usual. I didn't think it would escalate like this. She almost laughed. You didn't think the world would react to a black woman being near a billionaire? He didn't respond right away. I can have you flown out, he offered. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe. Amara stared at the crack in her ceiling. That's the difference between us, Cassian. You can escape. I have to live in this skin. Silence stretched between them like an ocean. Then she said it. I don't want to disappear. He exhaled. Then what do you want? Amara looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her phone. I want to be heard. Not pied, not erased, heard. She hung up, and for the first time in 2 days, she didn't cry. She started writing instead. Amara sat on her bedroom floor, laptop open, the webcam's tiny green light glowing back at her like a dare. No makeup, no ring light, just her barefaced, tired wine stains still faintly visible on her blouse, like a scar she no longer tried to hide. She hit record. At first there was only silence, the hum of a city outside, the weight of millions of strangers breathing down her neck through screens. Then she spoke. I wasn't planning to say anything, she began. But then I remembered something my mom used to say. If they're going to write your story without you, at least make sure they get the ending wrong. She took a breath, steadying her voice. I didn't sneak into a party. I was working. That dress code, I wore it because it was the uniform. That wine on my shirt, that wasn't clumsiness. It was a message. One I've received in 100 different ways my whole life. She paused. Not for drama, but to breathe. And yes, I stood next to Cassie Wolf on a balcony. He didn't invite me up for entertainment. He invited me because I didn't disappear when the room asked me to, because I stood still when someone tried to erase me with red wine and white gloves. She leaned in, her voice softening. Being black in spaces like that is a balancing act. You learn how to be invisible without being invisible. You learn how to smile when they reduce you to a punchline. You learn to survive the party without ever being part of it. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. I'm not telling this story for sympathy. I don't want your pity. I want people to understand that what happened at that gala wasn't about one glass of wine or one viral photo. It was about every time someone like me gets told silently or out loud, "You don't belong here." She sat back, eyes locked on the lens. Well, I do belong here. Maybe not in your version of the story, but in mine. She smiled. I take up space. Then she clicked upload. It was just a 4-minute video. No filters, no edits, just truth. And it spread like wildfire. The video went viral in less than a day. By the end of the week, it had over 6 million views. Not because of drama, not because of Cassian Wolf's name, but because Amara Delaney spoke what so many had felt and never had the platform to say. For the first time in her life, Amara wasn't a background figure. She wasn't a rumor. She wasn't a what if. She was seen fully. Her inbox changed overnight. Messages from Black women all over the country. Students, lawyers, nurses, artists, all of them writing the same thing. Thank you for saying it out loud. Brands tried to reach out. Influencers wanted collaborations. Podcasts requested interviews. And in the middle of the whirlwind, Cassian called again. But this time, it wasn't just a check on her. I've been thinking, he said, about your voice, about what it can build. She listened in silence. I want to start something, he continued. A fund, a grant program for Black students in the arts, named after my mother, but led by someone who knows what it feels like to be overlooked. There was a pause. I want you to run it. Amara blinked. You want me to be a figurehead? No, he replied. I want you to be the decision maker. For a moment, she considered it. Then she said, only if it's not about charity. I don't want to be the exception. I want to create access without asking permission. Cassian didn't hesitate. That's exactly what I had in mind. The announcement came 2 weeks later. The Delaney Wolf Initiative for Representation in the Arts. Applications opened within days. The website crashed within hours. People cared not because of Cassian's money, but because of Amara's story. But she didn't stop there. She held workshops, visited schools, spoke on panels. Not as the girl from the scandal, but as the woman who chose to stand in the fire and speak anyway. And slowly something shifted, not just in her life, but in how she saw herself. She was no longer the server who stood next to power. She had become power, quiet, grounded, purposeful, a new chapter written in her own voice, on her own terms. And for the first time in a long time, Amara wasn't surviving the room. She was designing the blueprint. Sunrise used to mean survival for Amara. Another day, another shift, another set of smiles meant to deflect rather than express. But now sunrise felt different. It didn't mean hiding. It meant building, living, showing up in rooms not to serve, but to lead. Amara Delaney didn't become famous because she was close to power. She became unforgettable because she dared to speak while standing in the middle of a storm designed to silence her. And when the world threw fire, she didn't run. She stood still and lit her own match. What began as humiliation ended in something much greater. Not because the pain disappeared, but because she refused to let it define her. Here's the thing, no one tells you. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It sits quietly at your core, waiting for the moment you remember it's yours. And when you do, it changes everything. Because the truth is, We all walk into rooms that weren't built for us. We've all been laughed at, doubted, labeled, dismissed. But what matters isn't how the room sees you. It's whether you choose to stay standing when they pretend not to. Amara did. And because of that, she didn't just reclaim her voice. She gave others permission to find theirs. This story wasn't about a billionaire. It wasn't about gossip or scandal. It was about something far more dangerous to the status quo. A Black woman who chose not to shrink. And if her story moved you, even just a little, don't just scroll past it. Subscribe, share it, speak up when it's your turn. Because maybe you're not Amara. Maybe you haven't stood on a balcony wind-stained and watched by millions. But maybe, just maybe, you felt like you didn't belong somewhere you absolutely did. And if so, you already know how this story ends. With your voice, with your name, with your next brave step.